Thank you for joining me on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. If you missed the last segment, I talked about the Steelers and some potential trade rumors around them and their wide receiver Deontay Johnson, why those have kind of stirred up recently, and my thoughts on them, and should the Steelers actually go through with it. That was in the last segment. Now, if you're joining me for the second half of the show, I'm going to get into two more stories. But before I do that, I want to remind you guys, if you guys are just tuning into the show now or have been watching, if you have any questions, want to engage with me, please use the tip and donations link that you see on the screen right now. It's GSMCPodcast.net. And if you're just listening to this episode, again, it's GSMCPodcast.net. This just makes sure your questions, I'm able to read your questions on air. They pop up here at the top of the list, and I'm able to engage with you guys. It's a massive help for the shows across the network, and we send a big thank you to you guys for being able to do this with any of your questions. That allows me to move into the third segment of this show with the Combine now officially being over with. It's in the past now. A lot of reactions and a lot of viral moments. History was made at the Combine with one of the players I want to mention here today. Part of my winners group that I have here from the NFL Combine. I'm going to start with the winners that I believed raised their stock the most this past weekend in the drills, the interviews, and all sort of stuff like that. And I'm also going to give my players, my losers, if you will, that kind of had their draft stock drop a little bit for a variety of reasons. Leading off with the first winner, arguably the biggest winner, or actually I shouldn't say the biggest winner. I should say the most underrated winner of this past weekend, in my estimation, that being the defensive lineman from Florida State, Brandon Fisk. At defensive lineman, I think the biggest prospect coming out of it was Byron Murphy from Texas. And, Brandon Fisk was in conversations of being a solid player, but he did very good in the tests and in the position drills. And he just showed great athleticism from all the clips that I saw around social media. He had a 4.7 840, a 9 foot 9 inch broad jump, and he just looked super smooth and super just quick off the ball and with his jump for a defensive lineman to run a sub 4.840 and have very good test results after that. He ran that at nearly 300 pounds. Brandon Fisk had great test results and just showed people a lot of things that I think he trained on during this period that you have between college and, the offseason and then getting into the NFL draft. I think he did a very good job of training himself leading up to this moment, knowing that this could be a great opportunity for him to jump off draft boards. And I think he showed a lot of promise in those drills. And I think he'll arguably won't be the number one defensive tackle or defensive lineman, wherever teams want to line him up in this year's draft, just based on value and attention that a guy like Byron Murphy will get. A lot of people will be looking towards him. And now with Brandon Fisk, some people might have him higher, but they know they could wait on him a little bit longer because he's not talked about as much. He's definitely gained some notoriety from this past weekend, but I still think teams will wait on him a little bit. He might be trending now towards the end of the first, top of the second. I can't see him dropping any lower than middle of the second with the sort of results that he has, and then he has his pro day to build on top of that. I think he's built a good case for himself in this draft just at the start of it. But moving on to my second winner, being the defensive back from Toledo, Quinyon Mitchell. And I've followed Mitchell a little bit longer before he got to the NFL draft. He was actually a performer at the Senior Bowl. He was a participant in that, as well as a bunch of other prospects at the Combine. And he had a great Senior Bowl. Probably the best defensive back at the Senior Bowl. Had a lot of good one-on-one drills against very highly touted wide receivers. Got the best of a lot of them at the Senior Bowl. Gained a lot of attention from coaches. I remember specifically Mike Tomlin, he was always talking to him. He actually went up to him in the wide receiver drills, the one-on-one drills, and challenged him to take on Roman Wilson, the wide receiver from Michigan. They had their one-on-one. Mitchell didn't do his best in that drill. I think Roman Wilson got the best of him, but he showed that character, that willingness to compete. He showed a lot of good ball skills as well at the Senior Bowl. And then I think he carried that over and surprised a lot of people with his test results as well, because he ran the fourth fastest overall of all the prospects at the combine. Ran a 4.33. The second fastest among defensive backs. The fastest was Nate Wiggins. But you pile that on top of his good size at 6 foot. He showed good agility on the backpedal drills, just all the position drills, fluid in all of those drills. And the only thing that I would count as a negative would be just his hands. He has good hand-eye, or he's in the right positions to make these plays, but his hand-eye coordination, his habits of catching the balls with his body rather than his hands, was the only thing I just have an irrational preference there. Anytime I see someone catch it with their body, it bothers me. It bothers me seeing people just catch it with their body instead of just their hands, compared to these other guys that you see, like Terrion Arnold had a lot of good hands catches. Nate Wiggins couldn't participate because he tweaked his groin, I want to say, but he's also another one that is good with his hands. And that's the only thing I would say about Quinyon Mitchell. His hand-eye coordination could be a little bit better. And just from reading reports, his fluidness, his movement, trying to follow man coverage, being one-on-one with someone could be better. But I think athletically, he surprised a lot of people and just caught a lot of people's attention with his results. And I think more people will look into him because of that, and his stock will rise more and more, especially if he participates at his pro day. I expect him to grow. He's probably the second best corner right now, listed behind Terrion Arnold, and I think just above Nate Wiggins, because Nate Wiggins couldn't participate any further in the combine. But that's where Mitchell stands up to this point. And my biggest winner, I'm sure the winner on a lot of these lists, is wide receiver from Texas, Xavier Worthy. I don't have to say much other than he broke the 40-yard dash record at the NFL Combine. Actually ran a 4.22 on the field, but then later the referees or the officials came back and told them that he officially broke it at 4.21. So already that breaking the records, making history, is going to shoot you up a lot of teams' draft boards. And he's not just a speed guy. That's going to catch a lot of people's eye, but if you watch him at Texas, watch him develop over the season, he's a very good route runner, uses his agility well. Of course, he can take the top of defenses, but short routes, intermediate routes, he's very good and very quick to get off of the one-on-one coverage, find the zone pockets in opposing defenses. So I think that's also very attractive, and then to showcase your speed like this was taking it to another level. He had a 10-foot, 11-inch broad jump. He didn't participate in those position drills just because he's waiting for his pro day, and he didn't feel quite ready to do it. He decided not to, like a bunch of other prospects did. But it's interesting with Xavier Worthy because he almost reminds you a lot of other fast wide receivers in the NFL. And sure, he might not jump into the top 20, maybe not for some people, but late first round, the Chiefs could steal him late in the first round. And if they do, he kind of reminds you a little bit of Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, able to take the top off the defense. They have a great receiver in Rashee Rice. Bring in Xavier Worthy, have that deep ball threat that I think Sky Moore was supposed to be, but he hasn't really panned out too much. I think they could have a lot more success with Xavier Worthy, and I think it's a very attractive proposal on my part, just throwing that out there. I could see it happening. The Chiefs just stealing a very talented wide receiver just because they're the Chiefs and it happens to them. But those were the three biggest winners in my estimation. Some honorable honorable mentions I have were Rome Odunze, just because he was solid overall on the day, and Ejarian Cooper was another one, the linebacker out of Texas A&M, and Isaac Guerrero, the running back from I almost forget where I forgot where he was from. I forgot the school he's from. It's not coming to me. But he had a good showing as well. Athletically, he tested very well. He tested first among running backs in athleticism, and he also ran a 4.33. Similar to Quinion Mitchell, he was near the top of the leaderboards in that position. So he was another one that was up there. And Odunze had a great combine, but he already had top of the draft projections, so he wasn't a big winner, a big riser. So I threw him in there as an honorable mention because I think interview-wise, personality-wise, I think he impressed a lot of people. But moving on to my losers, I also have three, starting off with the cornerback from Alabama, Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think at the start of his whole college journey, I think he was projected to be the best among these defensive backs. But at the combine and just leading into it, he was dealing with a foot injury, wasn't able to participate. And because of that, and not having a great last year at Alabama, piling that on top of great performances by Terrion Arnold at the combine, Quinion Mitchell, like I mentioned, was a big winner, very popular among a lot of people. And Nate Wiggins just running an outstanding 40. People are just going to gravitate towards that. And because he didn't participate, because there's questions around his foot injury, his performance at Alabama that last year, it's going to be tough. He's going to have a great pro day to kind of catch up to these other guys because he didn't participate due to the injury. That's reasonable, but, he's kind of has to catch up now. And there's more pressure on him now to perform at his pro day and show why he can compete with these other guys that have surprised a lot of people. Another loser that I have might be a surprising one, but for me, it was Amarius Mims, the tackle from Georgia. Another one that got injured running the 40-yard dash. He tweaked his hamstring, and now with his pro day coming up, there's still questions there if he's going to participate. I think he has to participate to show these scouts and these teams that go see him, what he's all about. Because in reality, the facts are that he had very limited starts at Georgia. He had only 8 career starts. And just based on the performances by the other tackles in the draft, Joe Alt, Troy Fautanu, and Talise Fuaga, all these guys had great performances at the combine. They're jumping up ranks. And because he got hurt, and there's been injury concerns with him as well. He's had ankle injuries. Now he's tweaked his hamstring. And with the limited experience that he had in college already, some people might think of it as a bit of a gamble to spend a first-round pick on him because of the medical history. He's got amazing size. His measurements are through the roof. He's 6'8" and 340 at weight. He ran a 5.07 and had a 9-foot 3-inch broad jump as an offensive tackle, which are all crazy numbers for a guy that big at 6'8" to post those numbers. But, there's just going to be questions around his injuries, his health, and I think, again, he's another guy that has to perform. If he makes it to his Pro Bowl because of that tweaked hamstring, those are always tricky to deal with. If he gets there and is able to take part in these drills and just perform in front of these NFL teams, I think there's more pressure on him to show why he's good, why he's touted to be a first-round selection. But, he got injured. That's unfortunate, but that's the situation he faces. And another one that could be questionable, but in my estimation was a loser, was just because of his great expectations kind of being dropped down a little bit. That's Drake May, the quarterback from North Carolina, decided not to participate at the combine, and you have guys now rising up like Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy, rising up draft boards. He didn't participate. There's been more questions raised about his decision-making, his fundamentals and stuff like that, and he didn't have a chance to rebuttal those doubts, and now he's in a situation now where people have the gap between him and these other quarterbacks a lot closer than it might be. It might not be. We're going to have to see how these guys pan out. But because he decided to not participate, he's going to be... He seemed to be the only quarterback that was talked about worse and talked about in a negative light compared to these other guys. Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy, Caleb Williams. There were some around Caleb Williams and not deciding to take the medical, but it seemed like all these other guys were very built up. I saw a lot of talk about Jaden Daniels being the number 1 pick over Caleb Williams. J.J. jumping up to be a top 5 pick. Michael Penix surprised a lot of people by the way the ball just flew out of his hand throwing-wise. And Drake May, he's in a weird spot now where if you're a big fan of him, you still have him at 3. But if you had doubts already, I think those doubts grew a little bit more because he decided to not participate as these other guys did and build his resume a little bit more with these teams. But, they're going to have other chances to do it at his pro day. He's going to certainly throw and do everything there. But for right now, those are my 3 biggest losers. I'm going to leave it there, and you guys, as always, can comment. Tell me if you agree, if there's a guy I missed, if there's a guy that shouldn't be on either of those lists. I want to know it all, and I want to know what you guys think of that. But that just brings me to the last break I'm going to take in this show. And on the other side of it, I'm going to run through the best available wide receivers that I think are left in free agency for these teams after Mike Evans was taken off the market by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and re-signing there with the Bucs. So don't go anywhere. That conversation is coming up after the break on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.